Joining us now is Economist and Chief Operating Officer at Fiscal Lab on Capitol Hill, Patrick Horan. Patrick, thank you so much for your time. When we look at political leaders around the world, President Trump is certainly one of a kind. Love him or hate him, he's pretty extraordinary. Here in Australia, our Prime Minister, I think, is pretty uninspiring. I don't think Britain's is any better. But Argentina has one of the most interesting leaders with President Javier Milei. How would you describe him?
There's a lot of words to describe. I would say he's radical in many ways. He's changed the direction Argentina had been going on for many, many decades. He's had two big focuses: cutting spending a lot to get Argentina's fiscal house in order. That's one big focus, and the other big focus is deregulating the economy. So that's a radical shift for Argentina.
Can we just look at some of those bold decisions he has made and some of the consequences of them? He cut government expenditure by 30% in his first year, including cutting government departments. Now, Argentina has achieved 17 straight months of fiscal surplus as of June 2025, according to the latest report from the Ministry of Economy. And it's dramatically reduced the rate of inflation, going from a monthly rate of around 25% in 2023 to less than 2%. Can you talk to us about this?
Sure. So as you say, inflation in June was about 1.6%, and it was somewhere in the previous month, in the month or so before that. So inflation was very high when Milei first took office at the end of 2023. It then continued to rise, but then it peaked and has fallen substantially. So on a month-over-month basis, it's about 1.5% to 2%. That's high for more developed, wealthier countries, but that's very good for Argentina. And on a year-over-year basis, inflation is 39%. Still very, very high, but keep in mind, Argentina's inflation wave had peaked at about 300% shortly after he took office. So they made tremendous, tremendous progress. And given that he's running these budget surpluses, as we have pretty good reason to be optimistic, inflation is going to continue to trend in the right direction.
And some of his decisions, he describes it as taking a chainsaw to government regulations. This has also led to a decline in the poverty rate in Argentina. Is that right?
It has, yes. So inflation has fallen a lot, as I've said, and real wages have risen. And one reason inflation is especially problematic is that it disproportionately hurts the people with the lowest incomes the most. They tend to be more constrained. They have fewer substitutes. When inflation kicks in, it's harder for them to find cheaper alternatives, and the price of the things they buy rises. So they benefit considerably from that. So as you say, poverty has fallen a lot. I think a lot of that has to do with the falling inflation. It's still fairly, there's still high poverty in Argentina. Urban inflation is still about 30%. So there's still a lot of room. Argentina still has a long way to go, but it's been making considerable progress over the past year and a half.
Looking at his approval ratings, a recent poll found that his approval rating stood at about 44% last month. What do you make of that result? How do people of Argentina feel about him?
Yeah, there are people who like him and people who don't like him. That's relatively good for leaders around the world. I think it may have dipped a little bit over the past few months, but it's nowhere near as low as some other leaders across the world. It's hard to tell if he's going into a midterm cycle. It's not uncommon for midterms for the opposition party to gain a little bit, but I would say his popularity is fairly stable, though, and there are people who don't like him, but I think there are also people who see there are a lot of problems in Argentina, and what he's doing, yes, there's pain in the short run, but you have to consider the short run pain will lead to long run prosperity. We're starting to see that already. As poverty has fallen a lot, inflation has fallen. There's still relatively high unemployment. It actually ticked up a bit. Unemployment tends to be a lagging indicator, so we're hoping that means that as time goes on, unemployment will also fall.
How is he going negotiating? His party only holds a small fraction of legislative seats, and he is facing an emboldened opposition.
He is, yes. So it's in some of his powers that he had through a law from a year or so ago, that's come to an end. So it might be a little more difficult to keep up with his agenda. It's possible, on the other hand, that as people grow to realize, hey, Milei's policies all seem working out, maybe he'll get some more momentum. It's a little hard to tell right now. Say in the next 12 months, will he be able to be as productive as he was in the first year of his administration?
He faces re-election in December 2027. Will he run again?
I don't know. That's beyond me.
Do you think he'd win?
Well, I think he's made a lot of progress, and things could change in the next couple of years. I think he's turned things around considerably, and I think really getting inflation under control is really the that's one of the biggest problems in Argentina. He's
Yeah.
done such an excellent job with that so far. Um, Inflation is really a government policy choice. It's a hard policy choice to get under control once you're used to high inflation. um, Getting the economy to grow well enough for unemployment to be low. That's not really the government's job. It's really private markets. That's their job. But that they can do that best when they're unencumbered. And
Mm.
Malay's gotten rid of a lot of bad regulations that are making it difficult to do business. I think between those two things, there's a lot of reason for people to, as time goes on, realize, oh, a lot of these policies seem to be working out.
Yeah.
So it's very possible that come re-election time, people might say, actually, yeah, let's keep this going.
He recently announced a reduction in export taxes on poultry and beef and corn, which was requested by Argentina's agricultural sector. Let's just take a listen.
Para tener un orden de magnitudes, esto redunda en una reducción de retenciones de las alícuotas para las cadenas de granos del 20% y una reducción de retenciones a la cadena de ganado y carnes del 26%, que será permanente. Estas reducciones son permanentes y no tendrán vuelta atrás mientras que yo esté en el gobierno. Pero es muy importante tener presente que todo esto es posible únicamente gracias al superávit fiscal que hemos conseguido, al cual cuidamos como agua en el desierto ante los embates sistemáticos de la casta política.
So he says this results in a 20% reduction in export tax rates for grain supply chains and a 26% reduction in export taxes for livestock and meat supply chains. And of course, he says, long live freedom, long live freedom. But what difference will this make?
It should be a boon to the agricultural industry, the agriculture industry in Argentina. Agricultural products are big exports from Argentina, and like pointed out, he's only able to do this because of the fiscal surplus that his government has been running. Because they embrace fiscal conservatism, fiscal rectitude, they have more room to cut taxes in other areas. And this is an example of a tax that wasn't so good for the economy. It was a tax that favored government. The government liked it, brought in revenue, but agricultural exporters didn't like that. So, and again, I think this is the kind of tax cut that would be very good for the Argentine economy, make it more competitive internationally.
Mm. Javier Milei was one of the first leaders to meet Donald Trump in person after Trump's election victory in November last year. Now the US is lifting visa restrictions, which will allow citizens from Argentina to travel to the US for tourism or business without having to apply for a visa in advance. What do you make of that, and how would you assess his relationship with Donald Trump at the moment? You know, it seems to be pretty strong.
Yeah, I think ease of travel for tourism or business, I think that's a good thing. I think for both countries, if it goes both ways, I think greater certainty is good. Making business easier is good for the economies of both countries. Um, I don't know if it makes a huge dent statistically for boosting GDP or output or any other metric in those countries, but I think it's a good sign of friendliness between the countries. And I think Javier Milei and Donald Trump they're both outsiders who are shaking things up in their respective countries.
Absolutely, they are.